Hi there, vinyl community. So today I wasn't sure about what video I wanted to make today. Um, I thought maybe I would talk about Yoko and some of her solo records, which I think that should maybe be a separate video because I think she's the kind of artist who deserves that stature. And there's a lot I think that should be said about her, and I'm not sure which direction I want to go in yet with that. So let's put that off for now. Instead, I thought I would talk about a band that has meant a lot to me and remains meaning a lot to me, and actually I learn more and more about it, all the time. And by the way, we're listening to here. Listening to this today. This is a somewhat of a more recent find, maybe 6 months ago or so. Stunt Rock Confusion, of course, turning the world on to amazing music. And one day, we'll talk a little bit more about this terrific little band or project. So anyway, I wanted to talk about, who we'll talk about is Cabaret Voltaire. And Cabs are a band that I found during those probably my college years, going to clubs, and you see bits and pieces of their music scattered into sets. Often heard them described as industrial, but they were at the front end of that industrial. And in fact, just a few days ago, I was at a local record store, and some of their early albums were there, which you never see. And I was very tempted to grab them. In fact, I kind of now regret that I didn't. And maybe I'll go back there. Maybe they're still there. I doubt it, because you just don't see those very often. An album called Voice of America, which are their real early experiments with tape loops, and they're only beginning to hint at the sound they would later, develop as their own. My main fascination with them has been during the kind of mid-period, which is albums like Microphonies. And songs you probably know, things like Do Right, and James Brown, which were hits. Were kind of, when I say hits, they were club hits. They weren't radio hits or anything like that. These are great, funky, experimental. The band would really develop a very, very unique rhythmic grind that, in a repetition that was just, fascinating. And what's unusual about it is, imagine this kind of post-punk guys experimenting with sound and tapes, and then develop into this funky machine, but funk without some of the soul in it, if that makes any sense. Funk in that robotic sense of the funkiness, this almost like think of like James Brown and some of his longer workouts, when it was just hitting with these like repetitious bump, bump, grind almost, and that it was almost hypnotic. And Cabaret Voltaire really went for that kind of sound during these years, during these mid-period years. I call them the mid-period years. And they did a series of albums which were, really big in the, kind of British and American, European undergrounds. I always really loved them. For some reason, this is an album. I Want You was the kind of big club hit off of this, the 12-inch of it. And this was always a hard album to get for whatever reason. I don't know why. I never even back in the day, I never would see it in the store. I remember one day seeing it and just grabbing it. Probably my favorite album is this one, Crackdown. And this is full of just, I know every one of these songs so well. 24, 24. This has a very kind of slows the rhythm down a little bit and gets very, very creepy. The subject matters are always kind of critiques of what the band saw as not a band, but the two gentlemen saw as a kind of creeping authoritarianism in Western society. And it's a topic I'm interested in and in agreement with them on. And yes, I think, and so you'd have songs like In the Shadows, Talking Time, over and over, just Fascination, Why Kill Time? Why kill time when you can kill yourself? Haiti Crackdown. They were all critiques of this kind of creeping authoritarianism in Western societies that claim on the front end to be democratic, but that increasingly make sure that the sources of power are insulated from the people, and so that no matter in the end who wins, nothing changes. Anyway, I don't want to be political or anything. A couple more favorites. This was kind of the end of that period. This album called Code, and this was a pretty big club hit. And the band, they got a little bit away from, although there's some songs on here that are there's a song called Thank You America, Code, Don't Argue, there's a song called Don't Argue. And it very much talks about how the technique of making the American public fear outsiders. And that's a technique you still see being used today. There's always this pending enemy that we need, that needs to be justified $1 trillion a year military budget. A lot of people getting very, very wealthy, and Cabaret Voltaire was there very early on. They saw that happening very, very early on, and a lot of other people did too. So this was probably the end of that era, of that mid-period funkiness. A lot of club hits, a lot of 12-inch singles. Early 80s. I think this album was, so this album went out as far as 87. But that was kind of the end of this period of Cabaret Voltaire. And they would over time eventually, hold on a minute, let me take this off. Sorry, end of the side. They would develop into something completely new after that. So they would end this kind of, let me show one more. This has some cool, this is like a kind of like a compilation. And what I like on here is I love the version of, there's some really good stuff on here, but there's a song called Ashtar. And creepy goodness, man. Not, there's not much to it other than these kind of rhythms and repetition, but that's all they needed. And they used a lot of samples and loops of voices, and creating a really thick, deep atmosphere on some of these records. Really terrific stuff. If you're looking for an entry point into kind of industrial, that was there with the founders of industrial, like Robin Gristle and that stuff. This is, I think, maybe a little easier to love and a little easier to get into, because there was a groove and a funkiness to it. But they also had a lot to say. So after this period, so after like 87, and this is something that I was aware of, but I never really threw myself into. I guess I was a committed fan to that sound. And then when they started to become, the band started to go into, acid house and techno and even more club hits, and started to abandon that mid-period sound. And I was admittedly a little disappointed by it at the time. In retrospect, I think that was a mistake, because I know, like on Stunty's Friday night stream, he has often played bits and pieces of their later period catalog, which he considers the really great stuff. And the more I've heard of it, the more I agree that there is fantastic music that was being created later into their career. Then there was an even they kept making music going on even when they started to leave behind the acid house and the techno and all that. But those are great records, and of course those records today are tough to get. I remember even seeing them in the record stores, and they were not expensive, and I wish I had grabbed those just because they were Cabaret Voltaire records. And I knew there was good stuff on there, but I wasn't really, I didn't throw myself into it, and I wasn't really aware of how good it was. And in retrospect, I think there was some really fantastic music being created there. Sorry, I'm looking to see what time it is. I have a Zoom meeting that I have to be on, but not for another hour. Anyway, and so that period that Stunty plays those fantastic albums with techno and acid house, and what was so great I think about them was their sense of melody and melodicism that they weaved into their dance floor hits from that period. And so they were really easy to get into and dig, and they were distinctive. I think a lot of people at the time, because they were so well known for that kind of that sound, that mid-period funky sound, that they weren't as accepting of what they were doing later on. And that's probably a mistake we make with a lot of artists, especially people who are very creative like Cabaret Voltaire, who are forever moving on and forever looking for the next step in their music. Anyway, all periods can be recommended, even the early stuff, which is more experimental and more avant-garde, but still really interesting. When I was at the store, when I saw the Voice of America, I spun it. They let me spin it. If you buy enough, they let you do whatever you want. I spun it and listened to a bit of it, and it sounded fantastic. And even that stuff today still sounds fresh and vibrant. Sounds are a little dated, but you can hear the vibrancy and the sense of urgency in them, and what would later become these fantastic, atmospheric, creepy, danceable albums. Yeah, Cabaret Voltaire, one of my favorites. One of my favorites. You're looking for an entry point. I'd say Crackdown. Any of these really. This is probably the easiest one to get into, and some you can. I think you used to be able to find this really cheap. I think it's probably still really cheap, and it's a fun record. It's not their best one, but it's maybe an easy access point. But all of these are fantastic. So Crackdown and Microphonies, I think, are two. I remember having the CD versions of them, and they were nice to have because they had the 12-inch of Do Right was on Microphonies, and that's the 12-inch of it is the way you need to really hear the track. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. Sorry for the ramblingness. Trying to fit this in while I do a bunch of other things. Everyone have a good day, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.